On today's video, Gear Iguana and I just got a Fujifilm X-T5 camera, and we are going to show you the best way to set it up. Hi everyone and welcome to Pal the Tech. If you're just like us and you've got a Fujifilm X-T5 or you're thinking about getting one, you need to watch this video. We're going to open this up, turn it on for the very first time, and I'm going to show you the best settings. It's all about the gear! You said it, Gear Iguana. Let's open this box. Caution information. This would be the power supply accessories, starting with the USB-C cord. And it comes with a camera strap. And this is actually a more substantial camera strap than I've seen from other camera companies. So nice job, Fuji. And there are a bunch of plug accessories. So you basically pick the one for the country that you live in, which plugs right in like this. So obviously USB-C cord goes into one end, the other into the camera. This goes into the wall. And of course it has the same battery as the X-T4. These are great batteries. And without any further ado, let's get to the camera. Have a look at this. SD cards go here. You've got your mic remote release port here, USB port, and HDMI. And there's one more item in the box, and that is this little dongle right here. And this is so that you can plug it into the USB-C port on the camera, and then you plug a pair of headphones into this, and you can monitor your audio while you're shooting video. Of course, I'm gonna lose this thing within 5 seconds. So I'm gonna tape it onto Gear Iguana's back. That way, if I ever lose it, I'll just ask all of you, and then you can just tell me in the comments where I had put this thing, because I will lose this. Okay, let's get the battery in. So I am now going to plug this camera into HDMI so that I can record the screen and show you my exact recommended setup. This is a big deal because you're going to be seeing a lot of this camera on this channel, so I'm going to be turning it on for the very first time right now. 3, 2, 1, on. Okay, so the very first thing you have to tell it is what language. I will choose English. Then go ahead and use the left or the right D-pad button to choose your time zone, and then hit set. Next, put in the year, month, and date. And for time, you could either choose AM and PM or the 24-hour standard. I do not want the app, so I'm gonna hit OK. I'm gonna go ahead and put the 35mm prime lens on this camera so we've got something to go off of. Okay, so the very first thing we're gonna do is set up our settings for stills shooting. Go ahead and make sure that the still movie knob is set to still. That way you'll have access to all of the settings for photography. Once you've done that, press the menu OK button to get into the menu. The first choice you should see is image size and image quality. Make sure that image size is large with a 3:2 aspect ratio. Next, image quality. Right now it's set to JPEG only, highest quality. I recommend you set it to shoot JPEG and RAW, highest quality. Now, even if you do not know what a RAW file is and you have no intention of ever using one, trust me, one bright day, you're gonna have a really good knowledge of RAW files, and you are gonna be so glad that you saved them, because you can go back to RAW files and make edits and make them look incredible, much more than you can do with JPEG. So you're just gonna have to trust me on this one. Shoot in both RAW and JPEG. Next, we're gonna go into AF/MF. That's autofocus, manual focus. Go into AF mode, and I would set that to zone or single point, depending upon your experience. If you're just starting out, put it in zone for now. For store autofocus mode by orientation, I would put that on. This is very helpful if you happen to shoot vertically and then you switch to horizontally and then you go back to vertically again. It will remember the right point for your autofocus. It's very handy to have that turned on. If you are a beginner, for pre-AF, I would turn that on so that you can more closely see what your lens is doing. If you're more experienced or if you're really concerned about battery life, leave that off. I like to have it on personally. Face eye auto detection. We are going to turn this on for now. However, I'm going to show you how to assign a custom button to get this thing on and off when you want it. For AF/MF, go ahead and turn that on. What that does is that if you're using the camera in autofocus mode and you've half pressed down the shutter button to autofocus, you can also rotate the focus ring on the lens to fine-tune your focus. It gives you the best of both worlds. Keep it on, it's very handy. For manual focus assist, I recommend you put this to focus peak highlight and then choose a color. I recommend red high. Now, your first important lesson of a new Fuji user, if you're a new one. If you happen to see, okay, have a look at this menu right here. If you happen to see that there are some that are grayed out, you see they're grayed out, now they're not. Now they are, now they're not. The reason for that has to do with your focus mode selector dial on the front of the camera. If you have this set to something that will not work with a menu item, the camera will automatically gray out that menu item. For digital split image and digital micro prism, if I have the focus mode switch set to S for single shot focus mode, look, it doesn't need digital split image or digital micro prism. But if I put it into manual, now look at it. Okay, moving down the menu, the very last item in AFMF, touchscreen mode. This is a tough one because people have very definite opinions on how to set it. I recommend, if you are a beginner to the camera and you're not used to the ergonomics, I recommend going in here and turning it off. And the reason for that is it's too easy for your nose or something to touch this screen and put this camera in a setting that you weren't aware of or are not familiar with yet, and you'll get confused, you'll get frustrated. You do not need touch screens. Photography has been around a long time before touch screens. You have them on your phone. You can live without them on this camera until you get used to it, and then you can decide if you want to use the touch screen or not. FYI, for still shooting, I never use the touch screen, not once, ever. For video shooting, that's a different story. You can pull focus, and that's the subject of another video. Okay, we're making some progress here. Let's go to the next icon, which is shooting setting. Go into photometry right here, and I would set this to center weighted. I actually think that this is a better light meter setting for beginners using this camera, so I would keep it on that. For most of these, you will accept the defaults. For IS mode, I would keep this in continuous. Remember, this camera has IBIS, and if you're using a lens that does not have any kind of stabilization on it, I have found it is best to have this in continuous. Yes, it will use up a little bit more battery life. You know what? Get another battery, because this is an expensive, amazing camera, and you want to have it operating at absolute peak performance. I mean, what are you doing here with this thing, right? The next one, ISO auto setting. ISO auto setting is set to auto 3, and that's good. Go into it and make sure that auto 3 has max sensitivity to 12,800. I have a whole video, and it's one of my better ones, on how to shoot with auto ISO, so search for that on my channel. The bottom line with this setting here, it's better to have high ISO and a lot of grain and noise than to have no image. Moving along. Now there is a camera icon for video here. You see that? We're not gonna make the settings to that here. We're gonna do that in the special movie mode. We're gonna get to that in just a bit. We gotta finish some other things first. So let's skip past this. Now we are getting to the button and the system and the screen settings. These are very important. Let's go through them. User setting. For sensor cleaning, I would make sure that it's set when switched on to off, when switched off to on. For sound setup, okay, this is under the wrench right here, sound setup. This is where you control all the different sounds and noises that the camera makes. So if it's starting to get on your nerves, you can go in here and turn it off. Or if you want them louder, this is where you do that. I don't have any recommendations for this other than the default of what it is right here, but this is where you would do that. Next, screen setup. This one's important. Go in here and I would make the LCD brightness to +1, possibly even +2. I have crappy eyes, so I actually like it a little bit brighter, but this is just one of those things that you're gonna have to see what works best for you. Make sure that preview exposure white balance in manual mode is set to exposure and white balance, just like this. Natural live view, make sure that's turned off. However, you will find it helpful to turn that on if you're shooting with a flash in very, very low light. I have a whole series on flash photography basics for Fujifilm. Check that out. Moving down, here we go. This is an important one right here, DISP custom setting. What you specify here is what you will see on the LCD screen or when you're looking through the viewfinder. Above all else, make sure that histogram is turned on. Even if you don't know what a histogram is, I hope that by seeing it there, it will nag you, and then you'll go and check out my video on the histogram and learn how to get the best exposure you can off your camera. I also go in here and I turn off boost mode. And that's because we're gonna set our boost mode to one setting and we're never gonna change it after that, so I don't need to see a little icon of that in the display. Too much clutter, we wanna reduce the clutter. Now, something you may find helpful, if you go into Information Contrast Adjust, If you put that into high contrast, you will find the menu items and the icons much easier to see. The next category in the wrench is button dial setting. And for the most part, you can keep these as is for now. However, and I can't believe, and I'm seeing this for the first time today, I can't believe Fujifilm is still putting this as the default for the camera. Change this one setting before the sun sets today. Shoot without lens, obviously you want to turn that on. And the reason you want to turn that on is because if you put a third-party lens on here and you don't have that turned on, you get no warning about it. Nothing is telling you that there's a problem. It's just when you go to press down the shutter release button, nothing will happen. You'll have your lens on, you'll be at your location shooting, and nothing will happen. And you won't know what's wrong because this will be in the future. You will have forgotten about this. So don't be like me, okay? Don't you be like me, and make sure that shoot without lens is on. I learned the hard way. The next one, I can't, Fuji, please consider changing this for the next firmware update because this can really cause problems for people. Shoot without card is on, okay? Which means that I could pack this camera in my camera bag, go out on a shoot, start shooting, everything is fine, and I could shoot the whole day and not have an SD card in here and get back to the studio and have 0 photos. You don't want that. So what you want to do is put shoot without card to off. This way, the shutter release button will not work unless you have an SD card in there to save your shots. Okay, moving along. Touchscreen setting on page 3. I put touchscreen setting to off. And I put touch zoom to off, touchscreen setting on playback to off. I don't want any touchscreen at all. Remember, these are my settings and what I prefer to use when I take photos. All right, you don't have to do this, but this is how I set it up. I don't use the touchscreen. Next, power management. Okay, we're almost done here. Auto power off. If you plan on shooting a lot of video and you're having the camera locked down somewhere and on, I can't recommend enough to turn this to off. That way the camera will never power down. As far as I'm concerned, I want to be in control of this camera and it will turn off when I tell it to turn off, not automatically. So I keep this on off. Again, you might want to set it differently. However, performance, put it in boost. I can't tell you how important of a setting that is, okay? That would be like buying a Ferrari and pouring paint thinner into the gas tank instead of gasoline, okay? You paid so much money for this camera, all right? You're crazy not to have this in boost mode. When you have it in boost mode, it will autofocus faster. The LCD screen will look better. Everything about it will be better, okay? Why wouldn't you want that? Yes, it'll use up a little bit more battery life. Buy another battery, okay? I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but make sure that performance is in boost mode. That's one of those you must set it that way things. And once you're there, go to the next item. And for here, I would recommend either frame rate priority 100 or 200. I choose 100 as I prefer a slightly brighter screen than a screen that has a higher resolution. Auto power off temperature here, I recommend you go into that and set it to high and make sure you click OK. The reason for that is that if the camera gets a little bit warm, it'll shut off unless you have this set to high. And you really don't have to worry about this as much with stills shooting, but if you're shooting with video, particularly at higher frame rates, like 60 frames a second, this camera will start to get hot and it will shut down. And sometimes it'll shut down quicker than it should shut down, as in the middle of a shoot. Keep in mind this will not damage your camera. If you put it on high, the camera is still gonna shut down if it gets too high. It's just not gonna shut down when it gets to low. High, shut down, low, no, I'll keep going. That's what you want to do. Set it to high and save data setup. There's nothing here that I bother setting. I mean, you could go in here and put your copyright info. I'm not going to get into that because it's kind of boring and I want to move on. Okay, but that's what that's about. Now there's the wireless menu option right here. If you're using the Fujifilm app, I have blacklisted the Fujifilm app. I will no longer use the Fujifilm app. If you want to know why, watch my review on the Fujifilm app. There are rumblings that there's going to be a new Fujifilm app. In such case, I will take another look at it and do another video on it, and I may come back in here and worry about this section. Until then, I want nothing to do with it, so I don't really make any setting changes here. One thing you should be aware of, if you are charging your camera with a USB-C cable, okay, and you're noticing that it's not charging or there's a problem, I would recommend going down here to USB power supply, I would recommend going in here and changing it from auto to power supply on, comm off. Auto should sense the cord and what the camera is connected to. Yeah, we all know computers, phones, and cameras are so much smarter than us, right? And they never make mistakes. Sometimes you have to give it a little bit of help. So I would set it to this only if you're having trouble and it's not charging. The other thing that I would check, since we're on the subject, is your cord. I can't tell you what a difference the right cord makes when it comes to charging the camera. Check out my video on this for more. I'll leave it at auto for now. Okay, we're now 2/3 done. We finished setting up the stills photography settings, and we finished setting up all of the system and the power and the screen settings. We're now gonna set up the movie settings. Go ahead and rotate the top dial out of still and into movie, and then press the menu OK button. Now you'll notice that this menu looks a lot like the menu you were just in. However, it's not. It's a menu special to the movie settings. Look at the left-hand side. You've got a little microphone. You've got a little time code area to edit. It's different, and we're gonna go through it right now. First item on the list, movie setting list. There is no way in this video I can explain codecs, compression, frame rates, and all of that stuff. So I'm just gonna tell you a baseline to set it in. You will definitely wanna learn about this. I have videos on it, and so does, a lot of other YouTube channels. But for now, I'm just giving you some bare basic settings for some of these more advanced topics, because we don't have time to go over everything. So for media, it says 4K HQ 16:9. And I actually would leave it there for now. You're gonna get amazing quality with this. It's at 30 frames per second, and that's fine too. So I would go ahead and accept the default. Using the D-pad to go down, the next one down is your compression settings. I would recommend keeping it so that the first SD card to the second SD card is there. That will save your movie to the first card, and then if it fills up, it'll start it on the second one. Press the right D-pad button to go to the next one. This can be a really confusing menu, and I need to make an updated video going through all of these settings. For now, as in right this second, I would just leave it as it is. However, I would go over one more, and I would change this to 200 megabits per second, just to give you a little bit more detail in your videos. Finally, your film sim, I would just keep it in ProVia standard. Again, as you become more experienced with this camera, you're gonna wanna be shooting in F-Log, not a topic for today. Okay, in photometry, I would also set it to center weighted, just like we did in stills. For IS mode, I would keep it on IBIS OIS. That way you're getting the best use out of your image stabilization. Make sure that movie optimized control is turned off. And while we're on that subject, if you happen to be in video mode and you're noticing that you can't set anything on these dials, like you're rotating the shutter dial and it's not doing anything at all, go into this area of your movie menu and check to see that this is turned off. This causes more problems than it solves, so I always leave it off. Okay, now under IQ, this is open to debate. Everyone has their own set of settings for this. I would recommend turning sharpness down to at least -1. You can always add more sharpness in post-production, and I found that the footage that comes right out of here with at sharpness at 0 can be a little too sharp, so -1 I think is a good place to be. Okay, AF mode, you see that right there? If it happens to be grayed out like this, make sure that your focus mode selector is in S. Go into AF mode and change this to area. That is going to give you better autofocus for video. For AFC custom setting, this is probably the single most important setting that you can learn and master for shooting video on Fujifilm cameras. I have whole videos on this as well. However, for today and getting started, I would set tracking sensitivity to 1 and autofocus speed, crank that up so that it's faster, perhaps to +4. AFMF, go ahead and turn that to on. Face Eye Auto Detect, I'm gonna go ahead and turn that on Eye Auto. Remember, I'm gonna show you in a few minutes a very important shortcut button for that. AFMF, go ahead and turn that on as well, just like you did in stills. Manual Focus Assist, just like you did in stills. Set it to some color you like. I prefer red high. Touchscreen mode, I turn it off. Next, we go into audio settings, and there's a couple of important ones you should make. Internal mic level adjustment, put that to auto. Same thing with external. Put it to auto. Until you know what you're doing and you know how to set your audio levels manually, keep it at auto. However, if you're gonna do that, make sure you go down here to mic level limiter and make sure that that is turned on. Okay, and that does it for the movie settings. Now, there's two other settings we're gonna make, and they have to do with your eyes, okay? The first is the diopter. You pull this out just like this and just kind of rotate this until it becomes clear. There we go. And what I recommend that you do if you're starting out for this is set the diopter so that you are seeing the icons or the menu items on the screen clearly. And finally, we have both the viewfinder and the rear LCD screen. Some people only ever look through the camera like this. Others never use the electronic viewfinder and they're always just using the LCD screen, like me, pretty much. So what I recommend you do, if you're not sure and you're just starting out, you see this button right here, view mode? You toggle this between various settings. Boom. LCD only. No, we don't want that. Next. Well, now you can't see it, but the screen went completely blank and it's only viewable in here. We don't want that either. Pressing it again, eye sensor. See this? However, there are a few times you're not going to want this. For example, if you're doing street photography and you've got the camera down here and you have this rotated like this and you're looking down at it, you don't want to accidentally put the camera too close to you and switch off the LCD screen. Same thing if you're shooting video. In that case, you would want to set this thing for LCD only. But if you're not sure, just for now, toggle it until it says eye sensor. You can also get to these same settings by going into the little wrench area of your menu, screen setup, view mode setting. You see that? And you have separate options for shooting and playback. Now I'm going to show you the final part of this setup, and that has to do with custom buttons. This is really important, and you're going to want to keep revisiting this every so often as you go through your Fujifilm camera journey. You will change what's important to you when you're shooting as you discover new things in photography or videography, and you're going to want to have quick access to those items on these buttons. Fujifilm gives us the ability to assign custom functions to these buttons. For example, right now, if I press the right D-pad button, you see, boom, I can set my white balance. It's a fast way to get to my white balance settings. There is also the Q button, which pulls up the quick settings menu. I am not going over that now. I actually never use quick menu. However, I have a whole video on it if you want to use it. I don't, but that's what that's for. So let me quickly show you how to customize these buttons, and I'll tell you the settings that I use, and then you can go from there. To get to the area where you customize these buttons, you want to press and hold down the DISP back button. Just press and hold it down. And there you go. Then you can press the up and down D-pad buttons to scroll through which buttons you want to use. So I'm going to start right here with this button. This button, as you can see, is the front button located right here. I like to have quick access to this button right after I finish shooting. So for this button, I assign playback. That way, once I've taken a shot, while I'm holding the camera, I take my finger and boom, I can see my shot right there in the LCD screen. Next is the top button on the D-pad. And for this, I like to have autofocus mode. That way, when I'm out shooting and I want to change the mode, boom, I press that and I can quickly choose zone, tracking, or whatever. I find that really handy to have. For the left D-pad button, I keep the film simulation, okay, the default. And for the right side one, I keep white balance just as it is. And the bottom one is power mode. And I told you, just keep the camera in boost mode. You don't need to have that. So I have changed that one and I put in self-timer. And one thing to keep in mind, there is a self-timer for stills on page 4 and a self-timer for video. And you can see the difference with the icon. You see this has a little video camera icon next to it. So pretty much I put it on self-timer for still shooting. Now when I'm out and about and I need my self-timer, I just press the bottom D-pad button. Now you can also customize the touch screen. You see this right here, whether you're swiping up, down, left, and right. I disabled touch screen. I don't use it, but if you want it enabled and you are going to use it, this is where you would make those settings. For these buttons right here, auto exposure lock, autofocus on, and the rear dial I keep exactly default. For Q, I set it to preview depth of field. Again, I don't use the Q menu, and I like to have it for depth of field, but your mileage may vary. And lastly, and this is interesting, and it's brand new to the X-T line of cameras. I've not seen this before, but you can customize the view mode button right here if you wanted to make that do something else. I haven't decided what I want to do with that yet, but that is really cool. I was surprised. I had no idea that they did this, and I really hope they bring this to other Fujifilm cameras with a firmware update. And with that, we conclude the setting up of the brand new X-T5 camera. I will soon be doing a full review of this camera. Well, anyhow, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you found the video helpful or at least entertaining. And if you did, be sure to give it the like and subscribe. I will see you again in a new video very soon. Take care.